Alright, welcome to the next episode of the Sports World with Patrik. Of course, today we are talking about the Kontinental Hockey League. This is the third largest league in the world behind the National Hockey League here in North America and the American Hockey League. It does, of course, have it is the strongest and highest level of professional hockey that you can get over in Europe. Now, of course, they do have a motto there, which is that hockey is our game. This was mainly started off as a Russian-based hockey league. They have added teams since then. At the moment, it does have 23 members. So let me go sort of give you a little history here about the KHL. It did originally start off as the Russian Super League. It did have a few teams that have stayed and a few that have left, including it had, of course, at the time 24 seasons when it was, or 24 teams that it did have when it initially formed. 21 of them were from Russia, and then there was one team each from Belarus, Latvia, and Kazakhstan. Of course, these teams were divided into 4 divisions, and of course, based on the performance of their previous season. There was, of course, during the 4th season, there was a plane crash just right before the season was about to begin, where it was the Lokomotiv Yaroslavl team that had their plane crash. All members of the team had lost their teams, and of course, they were supposed to be playing their opening game in Minsk. The opening game, of course, did get started off, but was suspended immediately once the news of the plane crash had came in. Of course, there was 7 days of mourning that had happened, and of course, they could not begin any of the season. Of course, it did change its name from the Russian Super Hockey League to the KHL. Now, of course, there has been, of course, the recent news of the Russian invasion of Ukraine that has forced many U.S. players or not U.S. players, but players from around the world to leave the KHL. Of course, not many players from the NHL were able to not many players were able to leave, of course, due to their contracts and their nationality. Of course, the NHL had instructed, of course, all of its club members at the time of the invasion to no longer do business with them, and any players that they would have sort of hope that they would come across the sea before anything got worse. There was that one player, can't remember his name at the moment, but he was a he was a Russian nationalist and ended up leaving. Got arrested for it. Of course, the KHL, of course, has a very high amount of teams in it. It does have 20 Russian teams at the moment, down from the 24 that it had when it initially began. It does still have one team in Belarus, does not have a team in Latvia, but does have a team in Kazakhstan and a team in China. Of course, the competitors to this, there's actually 2 competitors to this, which is the Supreme Hockey League, another Russian hockey league. That's the second highest one. And, of course, the Junior Hockey League, which is, of course, a junior league in Russia. Now, as it comes to as for the KHL, of course, as I mentioned, there are a lot of players that play there and that were sort of forced to come back to North America and to their countries when the original invasion of Russia and Russia invading Ukraine has started the war there. Of course, they have now moved actually to almost the same setup as the NHL, where they do have a Western and an Eastern Conference team. Of course, they do have multiple different rules, including the rules. Even though this league is not mainly Russian, no team is allowed to sign more than 5 foreign players, and of course, those are just for the Russian teams. The non-Russian teams have to have at least five players from their country to play in those to play there. Of course, when the NHL had its lockout a few times, a few players have actually went over to the KHL, and actually there was more recently a situation with the KHL where one of their players was playing, and it was he ended up playing after being told by the international Ice Hockey Federation, the IHF, for from even, of course, he played over in Europe, and it was a Russian goaltender, Ivan Fedotov, who ended up, of course, being impacted. This is the more recent one who was impacted about it. But he initially was told by the IHF not to play for that team in the KHL. He was not allowed to. He had a valid contract with the Philadelphia Flyers of the National Hockey League, and of course he was told not to play. Of course he did end up playing. He is banned from international play for the next 3 years. And of course, for the next 3 years, he cannot play internationally until he ends up. He can appeal that, but it more than likely would not be a very big opportunity to win that appeal. But of course, as it's mentioned, a lot of the NHL players, when the lockouts were happening with the KHL pre the war, of course, they were allowed to sign there and would go and play just so that they could have at least somewhat of a season. Of course, like in the NHL, where the NHL Player Association is sort of the bargaining group for the players between the players in the league. The KHL players are represented by the Kontinental Hockey League Players Trade Union. Now, of course, they do have a trophy. The trophy is called the Gargan Cup. It is awarded to the winner of the playoffs, of course. Like with all the other leagues that we just talked about, more recently they do have a champion of Russia, a champion of the different leagues, or the different countries that there are there. They do have an Eastern Conference Cup, a Western Conference Cup, and of course they do have the conference final winner. I'm sorry, that's for the conference finals. Of course, they are the winner of the regular season is awarded the Continental Cup. As for this, of course, there's been many players who have came across from the Continental Hockey League into the NHL. Some teams who don't have enough room on their AHL teams do have to play over there. So let me go ahead and give you the leagues that are there. So let's go ahead and start off with the team playing out of St. Petersburg, Russia, which is the SK St. Petersburg. They play at the SKA Arena. Next is the Hockey Club of Sochi. Sochi Condor. They play out of Sochi. They play at the Bolsumi Ice Dome. Next is the Spartak Moscow. They play out of Moscow. They are at the Megasport Arena. Next is the Torpedo Nizhny Novgorod. They play out of Nizhny. They play at the Trade Union Sports Palace. Next is the hockey club of Vitse. They play out of Balasheva. Of course, they do play in the what's called the Borovov division of the Western Conference. Of course, next, let me give you the next division. Next division is the Tarasov division, and this is also in the Western Conference. So let's start off with the CSK Moscow. They play out of CSK or out of Moscow at the CSK Arena. Next is the Dynamo Minsk. They play out of Minsk, Belarus. They play out of the Minsk Arena. Next is the Dynamo Moscow. They also play out of Moscow, Russia. They play at the VTB Arena. Next is the Red Star Cilium. They play out of Beijing, China. They play at the Mitsubishi Arena. The Lokomotiv Yaroslavia. They play out of Yaroslavl. They play out of Arena 2000. And the last team in the Tarasov division is the Sarastov Cherepovets. They play out of Cherepovets, Russia. They play at the Ice Palace. Now we turn our attention to the the Eastern Division. In the Eastern Conference. In the Eastern Conference, they have two divisions between the Karamovo and the Sherovi. So let's go into the Karalovmov. First, we have the AK Bars Kazan. They play out of Kazan, Russia, out of the Tenerife Arena. Next is the Automobilists Yekaterinburg. They play out of Yekaterinburg, Russia. They play at the KRK Uralilet Arena. Next is the Lada Togoliati. They play out of Togoliati, Russia. They play at the Lada Arena. Next is the Metallurg Montigorsk. They play at Montigorsk, Russia, and they play at Arena Metallurg. Next is the Neftek Himisik. They play at a Nizhemkazk, Russia, out of the LCC Arena. And the last team in the Karlomov Arena, of course, is the Nefelesik Himik Nizhekamis, and they play out of Nizhekamis, Russia, at the SCC Arena. I think. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. It's a Takarok Shelobinsk. They play out of Shelobinsk, Russia, and they play out of the Tarko Ice Arena. Next is the Admiral. This is out of the Sheroviv division. The Sheroviv Arena division's got the Admiral Volisvolsk. They play out of Volisvolsk, Russia, and they play at the Feltisov Arena. Next is the Amur Khabarovsk. They play out of Khabarovsk, Russia. They play at the Platinum Arena. Next is the Avangard Minsk. They play out of Minsk, Russia, and at the G-Dive Arena. Next is the Bars Astana. This is a team out of Kazakhstan. They play at Austria, Kazakhstan, and they play at the Bars Arena. Next is the Soviet Yova Race Ufa. They play out of Ufa, Russia, and they play at the Ufa Arena. The very last team in the KHL is the Sibir Novosibirsk. They play at Novosibirsk, Russia, and at the Sibir Arena. Now, of course, they do have multiple different winners, including the Opening Cup winner, the Golden Stick, which is their regular season MVP, and their playoff MVP. Of course, like I mentioned, this is a league that normally most people go to. It's got some of the higher attendance in the league. Of course, they do have an all-star game in the same way that the NHL does. Of course, at the very beginning of it used to be the Russian players versus the rest of the world, but now it is just is sort of set up the same way the as the NHL All Star Game. So that will be all for this episode. In the next episode, we're shifting it into a different gear. We're going to a different sport on a different part of the world. Thank you.